It's probably relevant because I think the thing that strikes us out of the discussion is, on the one hand, the conversation over the last day or so has been about the need to establish relationships, yet the impression one gains is that the imposition of SCAS in particular has created a particular challenge, and obviously in relation to the Saudi market, not just challenges, shut the market. How well has Australia managed that issue? You know, is it a cause of considerable resentment in these markets that there's an assumption from Australia that we can impose standards or requirements within the market on customers who purchase products and pay for them? I know, and it's maybe a ticklish question for a couple of you, but I guess, Susanna, you've had experience in the Middle East. What is the take-out message in the market from that in relation to where Australia sits in the market?
Actually, Sam, do you want to go first? Because I can answer this easily, but it's probably interesting to hear it from both sides.
Yeah, sure. Look, it's no easy feat when regulations changed overnight. That back in 2011, and it was rolled out over a 12-month period to the Middle East and all markets globally, and it's certainly challenging when it becomes a condition of trade that you'll have to meet all of these specific requirements. And now, yes, it did come in quite hard, and it did challenge and strain all of the relationships. And Saudi Arabia is a classic example of that. They had very strong sovereignty issues, and they still feel very strong about those issues of external auditing to come in and check through. And it's really hard to reverse a lot of those things. It's certainly we need to work on those relationships, and it is a government regulation, it's a government requirement, and I don't want to go into a debate about whether or not that should be amended to cater for those markets. I think it's important that everything certainly is consistent. But yeah, going across a region and making a condition of sale has and continues to present challenges when you're talking to customers who have purchased the animal that's standing in their feed yard, and yet they have to stay within a supply chain. But for us, our industry, it's critical because we can only assure the welfare of the animals if they stay within the supply chain, and that's really fundamental to the longevity of our industry, which is most important to us, I guess. We are working on some areas where we can look at, talking about some of the success stories. I've been in Malaysia and worked with goat operations there that are actually turning around and saying, firstly you used to come here and keep offering your training, and that used to drive us mad. And then you came here with SCAS and you told us it would be a good thing, and I thought it would be a bad thing. But it's actually working, because I stood in his butcher shop and he's got this loop video going on where he's had a video of the goats, on the farm in Australia arriving, and some footage of them in his feedlot and being processed. He goes, when the customer asks me where my livestock come from, I point to the video, and he goes, my shelf life and the meat colour is a lot better because of the systems that you've put in place. So there are success stories about how we align them and talk to these guys and say, look, it will take time, but it is probably one of the most straining negotiations to have had.
Just to explain the situation in Saudi Arabia, all the processing facilities in Saudi Arabia are owned by the Saudi government. So there are no privately owned abattoirs. And to get a kill, it's a very heavily regulated process. It is illegal to slaughter on the street or anywhere else. You are only permitted to slaughter in a facility. Therefore, what SCAS does is it says, we will regulate the Saudi government's regulatory system. And that is where Saudi Arabia have said, hang on a minute, we're in Saudi Arabia, we don't get regulated by the Australian government. So it is an issue of sovereignty. It's unlikely that they're going to back down on it, because it's, you know, if somebody came into Australia and regulated the Australian government, there's actually only one other precedent of Australia having capacity or applying extraterritoriality, and that's in nuclear. So the International Atomic Energy Agency does permit extraterritorial application of a domestic country's regulations for the export of uranium. But cows are just that little bit different to uranium. So there is not really any international law justification for the regulatory system that Australia has put in place, and therefore it's a compliant. The importing country must accept SCAS. They must say that we agree to be regulated. So that's how it's been put in all the other countries. The other countries have actually accepted SCAS. Saudi Arabia said, well, hang on, no. We don't accept being regulated by the Australian government. I don't know. I've sat through lots of discussions on this issue. It is a fundamental one, this one. Sometimes it's sometimes when you're a lawyer and you negotiate, you kind of find your common ground and you work out the ones that are fundamental deal breakers, and it's a deal breaker. So it was a deal breaker, the deal broke. Saudi Arabia said, fine, we don't take Australian sheep anymore. 2 million head overnight stopped. But they're not starving. They're still taking over 7 million sheep. They're just getting them from somewhere else, as Sam said. So I guess, we make a decision as an industry. Do we just move on, accept that that's the situation? They're not going to accept SCAS. We're not going to change SCAS. Away we go. Or we keep, trying as best we can to move around it. But, the discussions I had with the Australian Minister of Agriculture, Senator Colbeck, last night, he recently met with the Saudi Minister of Agriculture at the G20. I met with the ex-Minister of Saudi Agriculture, had dinner in his house recently. We're pretty much all on the same page. It's a deal breaker. So, there's no easy answer to it. Other countries have accepted it, but Saudi's unlikely to change. And, from the Minister Joyce's perspective, and as Sam rightly pointed out, making an exception for one country is, again, probably not in the interests of the system. So we've put in place a system, as Sam said, it's actually resulting in improvements in the industry, improvements in processing, etc. So that's the end of it. The discussion. There's not much more that can be had on that one, unfortunately. It's just where we're at.
Okay. Now we're going for questions.
Two questions. I've worked in this industry and very passionate about it. First one for Sam. When I drive in Brisbane, I see these huge signs. And I also see one back at taxis, and I almost don't want to get into the taxi. Say, live, I have this picture of a steer, it looks like it's crying, and Animal Australia get rid of live exports. We do a really good job. Why do we leave an information vacuum to these people? Why do we take them on? Second question is in respect to halal. There's a disturbing trend in Queensland that they want absolutely everything labeled halal, even if it's for domestic consumption, so they can choose or not to buy it. And I see huge complications to that, but are we working on trying to make this not happen? So two different questions.
Well, there's probably a taxi downstairs waiting for you with one of those signs on there. But look, it is a challenge, and I think I'll answer it in two parts. And the first part is we are taking them on because we're running the programs that we are, and we're supporting exporters through the regulations that are driving significant global improvement. And the things I've been able to talk about, the programs we're running, are really working hard on improving those things. And if we can improve those things, then there is it's harder and harder for that material to be generated. We just want to eradicate that. And I think that's where the work, that's my organisation's focus, is actually working on the ground, working with the people. You know, in the last, since 2011, LifeCorp and MLA have trained over 8,000 people across the globe in animal handling and welfare. And they're the people who are actually really making a real difference. You know, the system is about eradicating poor practices. But, you know, what they're doing is obviously appealing to the public. And that's the important part that we need to be able to understand as well. And you know, I'm really crossing into our Peak Council's area here, that this is an area that they work in the social licence to operate. And how we engage the community on questioning their message and the relevance of that message as opposed to what we're doing, what the industry is striving to achieve. So it is a very important delineation for us that we need to work on. Firstly, in the markets, but you know, we do have we're seeing some really good improvements, and it's content rich. We've got some really great things, but there's no point in us going out and going and saying how great it is when you do have setbacks. The reality is there are setbacks. There's Israel. We're openly talking about it, and that's what our industry is doing to challenge it as well. Is actually talking about it as opposed to you know, pretending those things didn't happen. We need to be explained to people that these things can happen and will continue to happen, but through our best efforts and the exporters' obligations, I will minimise that. Sorry, I can't remember what the second question.
The second question was about halal certification and whether it sort of almost becomes universal.
Well, others might have a comment. Halal is a very important thing in the Middle East. There's no doubt about it. When you talk to standing queues at Eid al-Adha and you talk about halal and all these things, that's very important to Muslims, and making sure, you know, there's always a bit of a question about whether or not a Western country can actually be truly halal and these sorts of things. They're constant challenges. These guys are probably Rob's best place to talk about on the chilled side of things. But we certainly understand and work closely with them on the halal requirements, and you know, we're trying to work hard to talk about ESCAS. ESCAS is all about care and providing welfare assurances, which is an underpinner of halal. So we're trying to work with the Saudis and other countries to say, look, this is really aligning with your halal certification, and most importantly, like Indonesia and Malaysia and Vietnam and China, food safety and hygiene. That's what ESCAS delivers, but it does play a role in halal. But I really probably need to...
We better let you go, Sam. Thank you very much.
I think we'll probably find out a little bit more through the Senate inquiry into food labelling that's going on at the moment. One of the things I mentioned earlier was the fact that the Middle East is a really important market for the sheep industry and the cattle industry in that it takes everything from the carcass. It's all the cuts and all the offal products as well. So to be able to access those markets, there is a requirement for halal production, and because you know a lamb slaughtered and it's in some cases it's exported as a whole carcass, but the offal's still taken out and then that's distributed across markets. Without that option to export to hundreds of millions of consumers in one part of the world, or if you add the cattle industry, it's Indonesia as well, and it's Malaysia. So it remains an extremely important part of the livestock industry.
I think there's also a cultural element to this debate. It's great to see Charlie here as well, because you know the halal issue in the dairy industry, it's affecting across a number of industries, and you know, you don't have to try very hard to find these types of comments on the internet. They're overtly discriminatory, culturally insensitive, and you know, the Senate inquiry has been announced. It's an interesting choice of leader of the Senate inquiry, but at the end of the day, is it going to tell us anything we don't already know? So Austrac have already done an independent investigation. It's a publicly available report. They say verbatim, there is no evidence to support that halal certification is funding terrorism. So if we have already had Austrac do an independent investigation, is a Senate inquiry going to give us anything more than what's already been achieved? The Food and Grocery Council of Australia have also looked into the cost of halal certification, and they say it's less than 1%. It's less than 0.001% of the cost of the product. So to take the cost of halal certification of a jar of Vegemite, which has been the common analogy, I think you had 37 years it's going to take you before you're actually going to get your free jar of Vegemite. It's not a cost of any additional compliance cost that comes along with halal certification is not adding in any in any identifiable way to the cost of the food that Australians are producing, so whether it's got a halal certification on it or not. On the other side, it is actually very important for Muslims to know what they are eating. And even this morning when I had breakfast, and I just looked at where things were placed, and then they had the bacon beside the chicken sausages and one set of tongs. And I thought, okay, that's what's happened. But in fact, a Muslim wouldn't be able to eat the chicken sausages because the bacon tongs would have been used on the chicken sausages as well. So it's basically a third of the world's population are Muslim. So if we don't cater for that by allowing them to exercise their cultural and religious requirements and them as individuals, if we don't respect that that's actually what they need to do as people, then we're essentially isolating a third of the world's population. It's most... We have to, I think, put it outside of that context. And I guess there's one more comment to be made on that, which is that I didn't live in the UK when the IRA were active. But I don't know if I ever heard somebody refer to the IRA as a Roman Catholic terrorist organisation. They were just the IRA. And it's interesting that every time there is a talk of terrorism in Australia, they're Muslim terrorists. Are there no Christian terrorists in the world? So I think we've allowed this debate to probably go one step beyond. It's an interesting question. It's not something that the Arab Chamber or the Arab ambassadors are afraid to talk about. I think that we do have to understand that there is a little bit of an underlying discrimination in Australian society toward Muslims, and is it justified? So that's probably a thought to take away as well.
Okay, there's certainly plenty to think about. Oh, we've got one more question over here.
Charlie McMillan, Dairy Australia. Just a quick question about the price sensitivity of the Middle East. I mean, from a dairy perspective, we know that it's a very price sensitive market. It's a very important market for us, about 11-12% of our trade, but we do note that when prices go up, volumes really cut away, and that part of that reason is with price controls at the retail sector across the Middle East, particularly in the Gulf. Keeping those retail prices low, which really is an inhibitor for us going up the value chain. Are you facing this in is this an issue for other sectors as well? And how much, so where does that position in the Middle East going forward as Australia, we try to move up that value chain, become more of a value-added supplier as opposed to, targeting in that commodity trade?
I think on the meat side, there's a place for all across the scale. As I mentioned, a lot of the exporters would love to focus purely on that high-end restaurant trade in the Middle East and just supply all the five-star restaurants in Dubai. But there is a scale all the way through for different products at different prices. At the other point where you talk about price sensitivity, we did see that particularly in around 2011 in the in the lamb trade. The price of sheep and lambs in Australia lifted considerably compared to what it had been for the previous few years. And in conjunction with that, there was a big supply issue in terms of the volume of lamb and mutton that Australia was producing and exporting. So you would see lamb not becoming as widely available, and wasn't just in the Middle East, it was around the world, and the price of lamb was increasing. So you do see difficulties in maintaining your market share against, in the case of the Middle East, poultry in particular is something that tends to be much cheaper as an alternative protein source. So if that price difference does increase too much, it can have a big effect on the demand for our product. And then once the price does come down a bit, because it does go up and down, getting people back into consuming your product is a lot harder than keeping them in the first place.
And it's an internationally competitive market. So in beef we only hold 6%, in lamb I think we're probably higher at about 20%. But what did you say for dairy? We were at 11%. Yeah. So we've got some really good competitors. So Australia is great at agriculture, absolutely fantastic. But so are some of the other countries as well. It's a marketing issue. It's a positioning issue. It's in your hands as the producers, as the exporters, as the traders. You can retain market share just as easily in the Arab market as you can in the Australian market, depending on how you position your own product. And probably the other area that needs, from an Australian's perspective, to look at is this brand Australia. And it's not helpful sometimes when we have 5 or 6 states competing, trying to profile Victoria or South Australia or even regions. Sometimes it gets confused. So I think a consistent brand Australia messaging, and MLA do that really well on the meat side. But that brand Australia messaging, I think, can add value to our products. So consolidating, bringing them together, and I know FIAL are doing so, the Food Innovation Australia Limited, which is part of Department of Innovation. They're doing some great work at bringing people, bringing the various food organisations together. But certainly branding as Australia and Team Australia, marketing ourselves as Australia, really will improve our overall recognition in the market. Because at the moment we actually are competing with each other, and that's probably not to our advantage long term. If we can come together, it'll make more of a difference.
Okay, unless there's any other burning questions in the room, I'm conscious that we've reached morning tea time, and I'm sure that the conversation can continue, but I'd ask you to join me in thanking our 3 speakers, but the 2 that are here, because I think certainly the insights in relation to the importance of the Middle East and Europe as markets for agricultural products from Australia, given the focus that we have had on Asia, I think it's been very useful as a reality check to understand exactly where the significance of these sort of markets lies and the importance they do have for agriculture in Australia. So please join me in thanking our speakers.